They say the ICU is the last stop. And when I walked in, all I could see was my world reduced to tubes, wires, and a barely breathing 8-year-old daughter. Piper was fighting for her life behind that door. I was praying for a miracle. Instead, I got a secret. Before I could even reach her bedside, a hand grabbed my arm. It was the night nurse, a woman I didn't recognize. Her eyes were wide, and she pulled me instantly into the shadows of the hallway. Her uniform smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Her voice was barely a breath against my ear. "Trust me and watch," she whispered. I looked at the door to my daughter's room. What was I supposed to be watching? The monitors? The doctor? The nurse shook her head, terrified. "Look for the ghost in the room, and if you miss it, your daughter is gone." A secret whispered by a stranger in scrubs. A secret that told me everything happening in that room was a lie. This isn't just a story about a medical crisis. It's about how far one father went when the only person who could save his daughter was the one person he couldn't trust. But that wasn't where it started. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop where you're watching from, because what comes next? You won't believe how brutally justice turned the tables. My name is Holden Crawford. I'm 40 years old, a building contractor, a job where precision and honesty matter. My life was centered on my daughter, Piper, and my wife, Lydia. Piper was the light of my life, bright, curious, and obsessed with space history. Our life had a comfortable rhythm until 2 years ago. That's when Lydia became restless. She hated our manageable debt and modest home. She craved the lifestyle of the wealthy clients I sometimes worked for. "We need more, Holden," she'd say, her tone impatient. "We're stuck." I dismissed it as ambition. I didn't see the mounting financial desperation. We carried 2 life insurance policies, one for me and one for Lydia, worth a total of $500,000. But Piper, due to a congenital heart murmur she developed young, had a specific rider on her medical insurance, a $2 million accelerated payout policy tied to a critical diagnosis and prognosis. The emotional beat of warmth I held onto was reading to Piper every night. Her favorite stuffed animal was a ragged, historical teddy bear she named Amelia. Lydia always said secrets protect people. She was wrong. They only protect the person keeping them. Then Piper started getting sick. It began subtly: nausea, fatigue, persistent headaches. Her symptoms were vague, coming in waves. Doctors were stumped. They tested for everything: allergies, viruses, rare autoimmune disorders. Every test was inconclusive. Lydia was visibly stressed, managing the appointments, scheduling the tests. "You need to trust the doctors, Holden," she'd say, whenever I expressed doubt about the endless testing. The mystery illness intensified 6 weeks ago. Piper was rushed to the ER with acute renal failure and systemic organ damage. She was immediately admitted to the Regional Medical Center's ICU. The doctors, led by the renowned pediatric specialist Dr. Alton, were baffled. "She's being attacked by something, Mr. Crawford," Dr. Alton told me, his face grim. "But we can't isolate the agent. It's like a ghost in her system." Lydia spent every moment at the hospital. She looked like the perfect distraught mother. She rarely left Piper's side, often managing the nurses and questioning the medication dosages. I was exhausted, terrified, and relying entirely on the medical staff for answers. I was relying on a system that, unbeknownst to me, had been compromised. But Lydia was about to cross a line that would cost her everything. The betrayal didn't come from a financial ledger. It came in the form of a whispered warning in a cold hallway. I walked into the ICU waiting area, my world reduced to beeping monitors and desperate prayer. Before I could even reach her bedside, a hand grabbed my arm. It was the night nurse, a woman I didn't recognize. Her eyes were wide, and she pulled me instantly into the shadows of the hallway. Her uniform smelled faintly of antiseptic and fear. Her voice was barely a breath against my ear. "Trust me and watch," she whispered. I looked at the door to my daughter's room. What was I supposed to be watching? The monitors? The doctor?
The nurse shook her head, terrified. "Look for the ghost in the room, and if you miss it, your daughter is gone." A secret whispered by a stranger in scrubs. A secret that told me everything happening in that room was a lie. This isn't just a medical crisis. It's about how far one father went when the only person who could save his daughter was the one person he couldn't trust. But that wasn't where it started. Close up on the nurse's frantic eyes, then snap to a silent, slow pan of Piper's room, focusing on a tray of hospital food. I looked back at the door. I had to assume she was right. Piper's life, which was hanging from a thread, depended on it. I walked into the room. Dr. Alton was there, looking concerned. Lydia was already by the bedside, adjusting Piper's favorite stuffed bear, Amelia. I spent the next hour simply watching. Every interaction, every routine medical procedure, I analyzed it with the precision of a contractor checking blueprints. I watched the IV drip, the medications administered by the floor nurse, the food tray delivered. Nothing seemed amiss. Then Dr. Alton made his rounds. He approached the bedside, checked the chart, and then spoke quietly to Lydia. "The test results are concerning, Mrs. Crawford. The organ damage is progressing despite the current treatment. We'll need to discuss the severity of her prognosis tomorrow morning." Lydia nodded sadly. "We trust you, doctor. We just want her out of pain." But as he walked out, Lydia did something strange. She leaned down and kissed Piper's forehead, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up the stuffed bear, adjusting its position on the pillow. As she did, she shielded the movement with her body, and her hand made a quick, subtle motion near the IV line. Disbelief turned to ice-cold anger. Was it possible? The mother who had stayed by her side, the woman who shared my bed, was she the ghost? Internal processing. The symptoms always came in waves. Why? Because the poison was being administered intermittently. The sudden acute failure happened at home, but the maintenance doses, the ghost, were keeping her sick here. Vow. That was the night I stopped being a father and started being a detective. I didn't confront Lydia. I didn't even hint at my suspicion. I simply became a permanent fixture in the ICU waiting room. I told Dr. Alton I was moving into the hospital to be closer to my daughter. I started documenting everything. I used my building contractor's eye for detail to map the nurses' schedules, the timing of medication deliveries, and every visitor that entered the room. I learned that Dr. Alton was often the only person Lydia spoke to directly. Holden realizes the hospital staff is either compromised or blind. I contacted Gwen, the nurse, via a prepaid burner phone. She confirmed my fears. I'm not the only one who noticed, but nobody wants to say it out loud. The symptoms don't fit the treatment. I've seen it before. It's Munchausen by proxy, or worse. Gwen explained that the substance causing acute organ damage was likely a common chemical, easily masked or metabolized, allowing it to mimic a natural illness. She told me to look for traces of a widely available heavy metal, something that could be administered in small, near undetectable doses. My mind immediately flashed back to my construction supplies. I used a specific compound for metal aging and corrosion prevention, a compound that contained thallium, a heavy metal, highly toxic, easily disguised. I drove home that night for the first time in a week. I went straight to the garage, ignoring Lydia's calls. I checked the chemical cabinet where I kept the anti-corrosion compound. It was almost empty, far emptier than it should have been. I went through Lydia's computer files. She had kept everything on a single shared laptop. I found the final pieces of the conspiracy. First, financial motive. Lydia had accumulated massive, hidden credit card debt, over $150,000, and was facing bankruptcy. The $2 million accelerated payout policy tied to Piper's critical diagnosis and prognosis was their immediate solution. Second, medical research. I found deleted browser history showing extensive research on heavy metal poisoning symptoms, dosage rates, and methods of administration. She was researching my own construction supplies. I photographed every screen, every log, and every financial statement. The symbolic object was no longer the bear. It was the $2 million policy document I found tucked away in her desk.
By the time I was done gathering evidence, I had enough to prove premeditation, financial motive, and attempted murder. But that wasn't enough. Piper was still sick. I had to save her life. My master plan was a calculated risk that relied entirely on Gwen's courage and Dr. Alton's blind but necessary obedience to procedure. I drove back to the hospital and met Gwen in the supply closet. I showed her the evidence, the insurance policy, the debt, and the specific chemical I suspected, thallium. Gwen was terrified, but resolute. We have to stop the source, Holden. If we confront her, she'll deny it and find another way. We have to flush the toxins. The plan. 1. The switch. Gwen would manage Piper's next 2 shifts. She would secretly swamp Piper's current IV fluid, which Dr. Alton insisted on continuing, with a benign saline solution to prevent any further poisoning from her end. 2. The bait. I would fake a dramatic emotional collapse and insist on taking Piper's beloved stuffed bear Amelia home for comfort, which Lydia had been using to conceal the source of the poison. 3. The trap. I would drive to the police station immediately and contact the FBI, presenting the full evidence packet, the medical logs, the financial debt, and the chemical residue I found on the bear. I walked back into the room. Dr. Alton was there. I put on the performance of a lifetime. "Doctor," I sobbed, collapsing onto a chair, "I can't handle this. I'm going crazy. I need something to hold on to." I dramatically grabbed Piper's beloved stuffed bear, Amelia. Lydia tried to stop me, a flash of pure, cold panic crossing her face. "Holden, leave the bear here. Piper needs it." "No," I yelled. "I need this. I need a piece of her." My outburst was chaotic enough that Dr. Alton intervened. "Mrs. Crawford, let him take the bear. He's stressed. It's just a toy." Lydia watched me go, her eyes burning with hatred. I knew she'd either try to retrieve the bear or find a new method of poisoning, but by then it would be too late. I drove straight to the FBI field office downtown. They thought I was a distraught father. I showed them the proof that I was dealing with a case of attempted murder and insurance fraud. The FBI and SEC, who were interested in the large insurance policy and medical fraud implications, moved with surgical precision. They coordinated with the police and the district attorney's office. I was told to return to the hospital and act normal. They would spring the trap when both Piper was stable and Lydia was cornered. The moment came 24 hours later. Piper's condition, thanks to Gwen's quiet work, had stabilized for the first time in weeks. Dr. Alton called Lydia and me into his office. He was flanked by a senior police detective. "Mrs. Crawford, Mr. Crawford," Dr. Alton began, his voice strained. "Piper's organs are showing signs of regeneration. We believe the toxic agent is finally clearing her system. This is a medical miracle." Lydia looked relieved, but also confused. "That's wonderful. We knew you could do it, doctor." The detective stepped forward. "Mrs. Crawford, we need to ask you about this." He presented a large evidence bag containing the stuffed bear, Amelia. The bear had been chemically tested by the FBI. Lydia's composure shattered. She didn't deny the bear's presence or the test. She looked straight at me, her eyes filled with cold realization. "You knew. You stopped me." Lydia walked right into the trap. The detective presented the financial evidence, the debt, the $2 million policy, and the browser history. "You poisoned your own daughter for insurance money, Mrs. Crawford. You are under arrest for attempted murder and insurance fraud." She screamed, not a sound of grief, but of absolute fury at being exposed. The entire hospital watched as Lydia, the perfect distraught mother, was led away in handcuffs. Dr. Alton stood frozen, realizing he had been treating the symptoms while the person causing the illness was in the room all along. The fallout was immense. Dr. Alton and Nurse Kendra faced internal investigation for failing to recognize the pattern, but were cleared of malicious intent. They were blind, not complicit. Gwen, the true hero, was placed on indefinite leave with full pay, protected by the hospital's legal team. Lydia's trial was short. The evidence, the browser history, the financial motive, the chemical trace on the bear, and her outburst in Dr. Alton's office was overwhelming. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to a lengthy term in federal prison. Piper's recovery was slow but steady. 2 months after the arrest, she walked out of the hospital holding my hand. The most dignified victory was walking past the front desk, feeling the genuine relief from the nurses and staff who had feared the truth. I never spoke to Lydia again. I divorced her immediately. I took the final confrontation not as a victory, but as a necessary surgical procedure to save my daughter. Community validation and support poured in. Piper's story became a beacon for survivors of medical Munchausen by proxy. I sat in Piper's hospital room on her first day without the IVs. She looked tired, pale, but alive. She asked for Amelia. I replaced the old, contaminated bear with a brand new one. Amelia went on a long mission, I told her, but she made it back, and she's safe now. Justice fully served. I sold the house. Piper and I moved to a different state, a place where we could rebuild our lives without the shadow of that betrayal. Revenge doesn't fix pain, it measures it. It validated that my daughter's life was worth more than her mother's ambition. Smash that subscribe button if you believe justice always finds its way. If you enjoyed seeing a father save his daughter from ultimate betrayal, you'll love my next story about a woman who discovered her business partner, who was her own sister, had been stealing from their family company for years. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Share in the comments. What would you have done if a nurse whispered, "Trust me and watch"?